go. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to outline Santa Barbara's Historic Preservation Program for you. There's quite a few facets as were outlined by Deborah. One of the biggest efforts we're doing right now that I'm going to start with is we're amending the Historic Resources Ordinance, which is a huge effort. So I'll go into detail with that. And I'm going to outline how to initiate, nominate, and designate districts and resources. And I'll go through our online resources that really are there to help increase awareness, appreciation, and cooperation, and help educate everyone on what resources we have. And then I'll go into a little more detail of our financial benefits of preservation, which I think will be really useful for all of you and your clients who are looking at or own or buying or selling historic resources. So to begin with, we are amending our Historic Resources Ordinance, which is about 30 years old. It has been added to little bits and pieces at different times by different planners and attorneys. So the language is a little different and sometimes contradicts itself. It reads sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. And it seems like something very, like you have to maybe have a PhD in ordinances to interpret. I interpret it for the public a lot. We want to make it a lot more user-friendly, and we want to update the terms and definitions to be consistent with the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Preservation Act, which is run by the Secretary of Interior. So one of the biggest definition changes you will see is in the potential historic resources list, which has about 400 buildings on it right now in the city, is going to be changed to historic resources inventories. It's just an inventory of buildings that have been identified as historic but have not been officially designated. I think that's one of the biggest changes. We're going to develop criteria and processes to establish historic districts, which we have no criteria or processes in our current one. And this has been a request from the community for over 10 years, since before I got here. And we have been working to do it with shoestring staffs and often pressing other priorities. So this has always kind of been pushed aside. So it's really exciting that it's coming forward. We're going to streamline the designation process so it's a little bit easier for buildings to become designated. We're going to increase enforceability. There's going to be some really serious penalties for people who do illegally damage historic buildings. We're going to improve the organization of the chapter. Again, that's just so it can be, and anybody can read it and understand it is the hope, and then eliminate a lot of redundancies that are in there now. So you can view the progress of the ordinance as it goes through. It has its own website, santabarbaraca.gov, HRO, Historic Resource Ordinance Amendments, HRO amendments. And on there now is the current ordinance, the first draft, and public comments that have been admitted so far. A new draft should be posted in a few weeks and probably returned to HLC by mid-September for comments. Then it'll go to the Planning Commission and City Council and hopefully be adopted in the next few months. That's the hope. We'll see how it goes. So I just want to outline for all of you, it gets a little confusing how many historic resources we have in their titles. So there are National Register historic buildings, there are State Register historic buildings, but locally we have 4. And the first and highest tier are landmarks. Landmarks are the most important buildings to the city. We have 134 of them. We just designated our 134th 2 weeks ago. It was the first building honoring the African American community. It was the St. Paul's AME Church on Olive and 502 East Olive. So anyway, those buildings cannot be demolished unless it is by nature, like an earthquake or fire. City Council designates those, so that they have to have a hearing at Historic Landmarks Commission and another hearing at Council. And these tend to be of extreme importance, like schools or really important things. So what you're going to see, I would think, more on the street are structures of merit. These tend to be individual homes, like a little bungalow, a little Spanish Colonial Revival cottage, a Victorian house. We have we have over 400 structures of merit in the city, and they have a lot more flexibility for alterations and additions, and I'm going to demonstrate how lots have been altered and retained their historic characteristics, because we really want people to live in them, to love them, to maintain them, and still have this unique character that our city is so famous for. And then we have structures listed on the historic structures inventory. Now it's called the potentials list. It's changing to the inventory. These are buildings that have been identified that they meet all the criteria to be historic, but have not been designated. The California Environmental Quality Act considers all of these historic resources and part of the environment, so they all have to be analyzed. So even if they're not designated, they're still treated pretty sacred. And then we're going to have our historic districts, which include a certain amount of buildings that contribute to the district. So we probably have 80% historic buildings within a district, and it'll be like a cohesive theme that brings them all together. I think one of the ones that's coming that have been requesting to be a district is the Bungalow Haven Historic District, which is right at the base of the Riviera. So how would you initiate the designation of a resource? Right now, people can just call me and say, I think I would like to be a historic resource, and I go through a site visit and work with the owner to gather all the historic information I can, and I will put it all in a staff report outlining all the criteria that it meets. The criteria are in our municipal code, and that is presented to the Historic Landmarks Commission, and they vote on that, and we'll discuss it. And I have this photo of this little, it's an Italianate style cottage that was built in the late 1880s that is going to hearing on September 16th for its historic designation. The owner's in the process of completely restoring it. It's on Orange Avenue, which is hidden. I didn't know about Orange Avenue until recently when I viewed this house. It's one block on the other side, on the west side of the 101. And it's actually a completely intact little street built in the 1880s, and it's just a hidden gem. So they're moving forward in that way. With the new ordinance, we will be having more of a formalized form people can fill out to initiate designation. And I just wanted to point out this building was designated a structure of merit last week by the Historic Landmarks Commission. This is in San Roque, and San Roque is just filled with little historic gems, and it might even qualify as a historic district one day. This building was designed by Edwards and Plunkett, who are one of the most famous practitioners of the Spanish Colonial Revival in Santa Barbara. So almost every stone you throw on State Street or in the El Pueblo Viejo is one of their buildings. And they really have designed what we call Santa Barbara, and this was built in 1929. And they wanted to become designated to access the property tax reduction program we have that Deborah talked about at the beginning, and we'll go into at the end. Historic districts are going to be a little different for designation, as outlined in the drafts we have of the ordinance. We already have 6 districts that have been identified that have not been officially designated because we don't have the language or process in our ordinance. They were identified by professional historic preservation surveys, where someone goes out and looks at each house and identifies what's historic and not, and identifies a cohesive theme and says, this is the little district here, meaning all the buildings contribute to one really important cohesive whole. And the reason we designate those is because if you start to chop and chop and chop at one by one at the districts, all of a sudden you have kind of a little bit of nothing, and one here and one there. And what once was this really precious resource kind of is no longer. And this became very popular in the United States when people just started seeing their neighborhoods chopped up, and people who started investing in districts, they saw their property values rise because it offers them a sense of security that the investment in their neighborhood that they invested in is going to stay. And people really seek out these neighborhoods and the uniqueness that they offer. They do need to meet the National Register criteria for a district, which is 4 criteria. And they need to have a professional survey that goes through and identifies which buildings are historic and which aren't. And they need to be about 80% of those have to be historic. So if you are a neighbor and you just want to designate one, you do need to really get a professional involved to help identify the buildings. And you can work with me at the beginning and we can start that process. And City Council and the Landmarks Commission are discussing about how to do owner consent or owner objections and how much will be required before they consider one in the new ordinance. So I wanted to just go through some housing solutions that people have come up with in historic resources. And I'm going to do one in a smaller little neighborhood and one in El Pueblo Viejo, which allows for a lot more housing, just because housing is such a needed, it's just needed in Santa Barbara. So this is a little building on Castillo Street, and this is an identified historic district. You see it was built in 1905. It has this beautiful sandstone wall. It has leaded glass windows in the wind here. It has beautiful like little brackets and wood, the original wood windows with these lovely like OG lugs is what we call them. So all these little details are just really so hard to replace and expensive. So we like to retain them if we can, because when they're gone, they're gone. And this is the lot it sits on. So it sits next to this other little Victorian cottage, which has sort of a cement wall that doesn't really contribute to the street. And this is a non-contributing building that does not have any historic merit. So the owner bought all 3 lots and gave us this plan. And I just wanted to show it because it really illustrates how he's going to keep this one, restore this one. He demolished this one, putting back a new one and putting units all behind. So he took what was 3 single family residences and put, this is the completed project. So he has 2 units in here, 1 unit in the restored house, which turned out to really relate to the street so much better in its restored condition. And the new building here, along with the buildings behind, all have 6 units. So now it's a 9 units development. And this is before the project again, and this is after. And you can see the units way back here. They're not really that obvious on the street, but they do really utilize the space that they had in their rear yards. And this is a project in El Pueblo Viejo. It's on the 200 block of East De La Guerra Street, and it is in full construction. So if you want to go by and see the progress, I'm going to show you the planning part of it. This building was built in 1875, and this is called the Ignacio House because Luisa Ignacio, who was a Barbareño Chumash woman, lived here, and she was one of the last speakers of Barbareño Chumash language, and she worked with lots of linguists and anthropologists to record it. And this is the picture of her in front of the house when it still had its little widow's peak. And this was all a working class neighborhood filled with these little cottages. And this was the site before construction. This was all that remained, like this last survivor, surrounded by surface level parking lots in El Pueblo Viejo, where everything new is supposed to be Spanish colonial revival. And there's big Spanish colonial revivals across the street. So the architect had to sort of bridge, how do I pay homage to this historic resource and be Spanish colonial revival style? So he came up with this plan. So this is going to be 26 units of housing, and he brought in these long linear features of the front porch of the cottage and put them into the this Mediterranean Monterey style balcony. And so he brought the verticality to that'll draw your eye across the street, that we really need our eye to move across streets to make them something that's pedestrian friendly and a place that we as people want to be on. And it's going to bring just so much vitality to a street that really wasn't that friendly, to be honest, when you were on it before. And like I said, go down there. It's really exciting to see it complete. All these pillars are in and it's moving quickly. So now I'm going to transition into where you can find a lot of information on our website. One of the biggest elements we added was a map that maps all the identified historic resources on our website. So if you go to SantaBarbaraCA.gov, you can backslash historic preservation and find us, or just Google historic preservation Santa Barbara, and this should come up. And here's the map. So it color codes all our identified historic resources. So purple is a landmark, yellow is a structure of merit, and blue is on the list. And when you click on a site, it should bring up a little information sheet. It tells you when it was built, why, what its status is. And then you can click on the document link and it should have the designation form that tells you why it's important, especially for landmarks and structures of merit. The potentials list is in the works. With the limited staff, we don't have all of those added yet, but this will tell you what the character defining features are, what's important about the house, and that can give you a lot of information that, especially if your client's wondering what they can do to it, it'll tell you what's important. And usually the flexibility comes in the rear and not the big street facade elevations. So also on that front historic preservation website, we have a list of some of the most important architects to Santa Barbara and their bios. So if you come across a building and it says built by Alex D'Alfonso, you can go and look his bio up here and see why he was important and what his contribution to the city was. We also have some, like, historic structure sites reports. These are big environmental documents on, I think there's a couple hundred on there. We have surveys that were done from the 70s and 80s that we still use to kind of as a base to figure out why a building's important. We have a list of all the landmarks, all the structures of merit, everything on the list for eligibility. We have potential districts on there and why they're important and the map of what we've done so far. And then we have historic styles and why they're important. And so for structures of merit, lots of them are important because of their style. They represent something that was really popular at a certain time in Santa Barbara, you know, like the Victorians or the Craftsmen or the Spanish or the Mission. And it'll tell you why it was important, what was going on historically, and the character defining features are listed out. And that's really what you want to look at when you're looking at what can I change, what can I do? Because we want to preserve the character defining features. So if you're looking at this Mission Revival building, the character defining features are going to be the terracotta roof, the Mission parapet, the porch, the old wood windows. But if you have a growing family and you want to put an addition on this, you could do something in the rear, very minimally visible from the streetscape, and retain all that, or something subtle on the side and the rear. And that's where we start to get more flexibility and the restoration of the front. So we try and want modern living and retaining these beautiful rare elements that are not as common and difficult to find now. We also have on there historic resource design guidelines that we've drafted that are going to be a companion to the new ordinance. They will tell you how to restore a window, how to restore siding, how to address old porches, but they also will help in doing rear dwelling units, building next to a historic building, and additions. And this building here that is featured was a one-story Spanish Colonial Revival style building in the West Beach neighborhood. And they got approval through the Historic Landmarks Commission to put the second story on the top. And they also received a Mills Act contract to reduce their property taxes for the restoration and work to do to the house. So you can see how they kept the whole front facade and pushed it back so you can see the original roof lines, yet got the space they needed to grow because it was a really tiny cottage originally. There's also, you know, if your clients are like, what does it mean to be a landmark or structure of merit? There is little handout sheets for each one that'll go through what they are, what the eligibility is, what the benefits are, as well as responsibilities that are expected. I mean, we only have jurisdiction on the outside, so there's a lot of flexibility with interiors. The Landmarks Commission is not even allowed to look at interiors. That's more just zoning and building and safety. So it's really the envelope and what is visible from the public street, because this is a public benefit to everybody to preserve these resources. So I just wanted to go through quickly the environmental benefits. We really, they really are the greenest buildings are the ones that are already built, and they just are, the energy's not used to demolish them and throw them into the debris. It's just horrible in our landfills. Also, energy is not consumed, not only to demolish them, but it's not used to create new building materials and transport them and add them in. The embodied energy that was used to create them and its components is preserved. And also, pressure is reduced to harvest new lumber and other materials that really have negative impacts on our resources. And, not only are they beautiful and unique and show craftsmanship and a story, they're really good for the world. I put these two examples up here because I think they show two really different kinds of historic resources we have. This one was a Queen Anne that had been very altered, and the new owner has bought it and is removing the enclosed porch that was done in a not so sensitively, and removing this odd addition here and putting all the windows back and all of it back to its original configurations. It's a great preservation story. And this is a mid-century modern building, actually designed in 1963, but it was designed by Luda Maria Riggs, and she's one of the most important architects in our community. She was one of the first women to go to Berkeley in architecture, and she worked under George Washington Smith in the 1920s. She helped design the Libero Theater. She helped design the News Press building, but her talent, she translated beautifully into the mid-century. And here you can see how she really captured that mid-century streamlined look that's so unique. And we have a few up dotted around the community that are real treasures as well. Now I want to just go into our property reduction program. It's called the Mills Act program, and it's a state program that each community can adopt. The county has not adopted it, so only projects within the city qualify for it, and you do have to actually be designated locally to qualify as a structure, merit, or landmark. The benefit is that by submitting a 10-year maintenance plan or restoration plan of work that you're going to do over the 10 years to a historic house, which almost every historic house needs something over 10 years. They always need a new roof or new paint or a new sewer or new electric or new plumbing or restoring hardwood floors or a new kitchen. Anything that sort of stays with the house if you were to sell it can be in your program. And the Historic Landmarks Commission reviews that program, and if they approve it, we send the contract to the tax assessor and they reduce the property tax. And typically it's a reduction of about 50%. So new owners who are buying houses that need a lot of work really benefit from this program. Because lots of our properties are over $1 million, so 50% off their property tax is a nice benefit for them, especially when they have a lot of work to do on the house. Just to caution you, the properties that don't really benefit from this program would be a historic house that has a new house on the same parcel, because the assessor takes the new property out of the top property tax reduction, and the numbers just work out that they're only saving like $1,000, and some people do not think that it's worth it. The other properties that don't really qualify would be somebody that's been under Prop 13 for a long time, like 30 years. Their property values, because of Prop 13, are so low, they don't qualify. I had a building come in and want to apply and they owned almost half a block on right off of State Street and commercial space, and their property value was $300,000. And we could never get that low in the Mills Act because it comes off of the, market value. So I was like, you just should keep your Prop 13 and be good with that. So the last real good benefit I wanted to outline was the California Historic Building Code. I even work with architects that have worked in the community for a long time that forget that there is this hidden benefit that can really help their clients. It offers so much code relief. You don't have to meet the current codes for a lot of things. One of the big ones for commercial buildings is you get a lot of relief from the ADA requirements, which can be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, they still have to make accommodations, but not as stringently as new construction. You can retain all the historic windows and even add windows to match, so you don't have to do the energy efficient ones. Historic windows, when properly restored, are really energy efficient. Or if in this example here, the windows are really deteriorated, but they can make new windows to put in to match the original and still be single pane. Probably will be just as beautiful. And I put this building up because they just received their structure and merit designation so they could qualify for this code. And they are adding a 3rd-story addition on top of the building, and that has already been conceptually approved at the Historic Landmarks Commission. So it was originally a hotel, and then it was a church, and now they're converting it back into a hotel. And it's a really good example of how someone's kind of using all the benefits and even all the flexibility that we offer to bring a building back to life. And really, I think it'll be a great, vital building on State Street. So, and finally, I just wanted to let you know that there are a lot of, if you're really interested, there's some free training webinars at California Preservation this summer on all sorts of topics on historic architecture. I think they give real estate credits if you need credits. So just if you're really interested, there's more opportunities. And that's pretty much wraps up all the information I have for you, but we wanted to leave plenty of time for comments and questions. So
thank you so much, Nichole. It was just outstanding. I'm looking at the chat, and I want to encourage anyone, if you'd like to include your question as a chat to Nichole, we don't have to be that formal. I'll ask Todd or Casey if we need to have the question in chat for any type of documentation purpose. Otherwise, we can go to the raising of hands. Let's see.
Should I stop my sharing? I should stop sharing.
Maybe that would be helpful for the moment. Thank you, Nichole. We have a question from Todd, our Education Committee Chair. How long could the process take for the approval in order to receive the tax benefit?
It's about a year. Well, we take applications once a year, every June, and then we file them by law. We have to file them by December 31st. It takes a while to process that. So it would go into effect the second part of the next year. So it's about a year-long process. So we do let people who want to start their project right before they're under contract, we let them add what they're doing in 1 year before they're under contract to count towards the restoration program, just because it takes so long.
Todd, did you want to ask a follow-up question of Nichole, or that was good? Okay, and from Kathleen Sawyer, she's curious how the landscaping is considered. For instance, a huge old tree that may be unsafe.
So we look at landscape in 2 ways. So with old trees, Santa Barbara as a whole is really protective of our trees, but if it's unsafe or damaging a building, sometimes the roots are damaging the historic building, because you do need to go to the Landmarks Commission and they can approve the removal of the tree. They usually will require you plant another tree or two to help in a better location or a better species so that we can continue our urban forest. We have a couple landmark trees. I know on Anapamu, the old stone pines, those are all landmark trees, and lots of them are dying. Or I know one fell when we had that storm burst, and they just plant a new one when one of them is too sick or dangerous to survive.
Nichole, our next question is from Pat Costello. What happens if a protected building is destroyed by nature?
So pretty much the Landmarks Commission has to go ahead and say vote. It's not savable. We can't do anything about it, and write it off. I mean, it's gone. There might be the option to reconstruct, but I don't. It's not mandated because it's no longer original. But some people have reconstructed. You know, the chapel at the Presidio is a full reconstruction, so it is a method, but it's a loss.
Okay. And Marcella is asking about something you mentioned regarding the upcoming draft in a couple of weeks. Is that affecting the downtown architecture and development? How and when can we post comments about that?
Great. So we will be posting a draft in the next week or two, I think. And I will get out as much public as we can that it's been posted, so you can go to that website and read it and submit comments. You can submit. There'll be a link that shows you where to submit them to the HLC secretary. You can come to the HLC hearing, and then after that, you can come to the Planning Commission hearing and council hearing. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the public comment. The first round, we had so much public comment. We really took them all into account, you know, as it's your community, your ordinance. So we really want to make sure all the ones that we can address are addressed. And I don't think it's going to impact downtown very much. We are so protective of our resources already. I think it's just going to help people clarify what's historic and how they're treated, because it's so confusing now. I find most people don't even want to look at it. So I think it's going to really clarify what it is, and we get rid of a lot of the little gray areas and be like, this is historic, this is not, this is how they're treated.
And Nichole, as a follow-up to Marcella's question, for public participation, can you just describe very simply where the public can go on the city website? I don't know if we had a slide, you had a slide for that, and also for the foreseeable future using GoToWebinar, which is the city's video conference platform.
Right. I can pull up that slide again and show you the website. There's a place where you can submit public comment. You can email me directly. We make sure all the public comments will be addressed, and again at the public hearings. So, and the public hearings will be posted as well. So that the ordinance has its own website, and let me show you where that is. Let me see if I can find it. It's here. Here is the website, and so on that website is the first draft, as well as what we have originally, like what we are under now, as well as there's a video of all the changes that I presented to the Landmarks Commission and some memos. So when the next one is posted, it'll be on there, and then all the public comment will be posted as well. So you can see public comment, we'll post your public comment. So it's a pretty open process, but that's the website. And I can email, you know, Deborah another contact when the next draft is posted, so that they can distribute that to your membership so people know when it is up.
Great, thanks, Nichole. Jason asks, let me go to Jason's question. Do you process Mills Act applications for both the city of Santa Barbara and the county of Santa Barbara?
No, the county does not is not included. And I strongly advise you to advocate that they adopt the program, because I get calls every day from people in the county that would like to participate, but we only process for the city. So the county has their separate planning department, and they can adopt the program as well. They just haven't.
Okay. Ed asks, how are state laws to promote housing going to affect the implementation of this ordinance?
So they work side by side. And that's why I gave some examples of how you can add to historic buildings, or build next to them, or build behind them. So we don't want our buildings to be in a museum. We want to address the needs of the community, while retaining the beauty that we have. So there's some really good methods of designing buildings so that they can be together. Like the big example of the 26 unit building next to the Victorian. They can work together, and that's what makes really dynamic communities, is making place for both. And we have the space. We have a lot of vacant lots and buildings that aren't historic that can change to something new while respecting something really special.
Nichole, before we go to another question, we ask you to possibly share with the members. If someone, a property owner, an agent, is interested in a very preliminary discussion, more along the lines of brainstorming than a formal concept, should they be contacting you in the city to start that discussion and brainstorm?
Yes, if there's a historic building involved, yes. I'm happy
Yes.
to look at preliminary ideas, um, and just make sure they meet the Secretary of Interior standards. That way, you're not investing a huge amount in architectural fees and just coming to the counter and dropping them off and getting, then you get calls from everybody at the city like, what are you doing? We can't even approve this. So we try to keep that conversation open, and a lot of people send me things like that, and that's one of, that's my job, is to help facilitate those discussions.
Great. Well, we'll put that up on the screen before we conclude today. And Kathleen has another question. Do you have a suggestion for real estate agents who list a historic property to help the city and the sale of the property as well?
I would suggest really highlighting the features. I mean, they're really unique, and people look for that. There is a market for that person, and I can help you if you want me to outline the character defining features. They can also talk to me about, how they can grow. What if they want to add an addition? We can look at things like that. And then you can also talk about the property tax reduction and things like that. But I think you're definitely talking to someone, when you're selling a historic house, that wants to buy into this beauty in this Santa Barbara that everyone comes here for, instead of to a tract house community. It's really unique, and that's the sale. People love it. People want to live somewhere special.
Our next question is from Katie, and she asks, is there a maximum or minimum number required for historic resources for the city?
No, there's no maximum or minimum. It's based on qualifications. So they call it evidence on record. And if the building has all the evidence of everything that would make it a historic building, like it still retains all its historic features, it's a very important style, it was done by an important architect, or represents a really important part of our culture, then it qualifies. And it's one by one right now they come in. So it's based on evidence, and that's it.
Okay. Marcella is also asking, does the Mills Act benefit follow the property upon sale?
Great question. Yes, it does. It follows the property upon sale. We've had a couple just sell. So the scope of work in the contract can be changed if, houses change, people's ideas change over 10 years. And so new property owners might not have the vision of the whoever originally got the Mills Act. So they can change the scope of work. There's lots of flexibility in that. Um, but they still need to do work on the restoration of the house, at least equal to what their tax reduction was, which isn't hard because most people spend a lot more than just the tax reduction in a historic house.
Jason is asking, he says, I just saw on the website that an application can be denied if the program meets its limits of $260,000. How often does this happen?
So it's never happened. We just changed the program last year because it was a pilot program and it was just reaching 10 years old. So the first 10-year contracts were becoming mature. And at first we just had 8 applications and a property limit of 1.5 million. So that was just too low. And we changed it to an annual limit of 260 because if we just felt that would be the maximum we could take as an impact to the city. Right now, with over 50 contracts, we have an impact of $62,000. So we have a lot of room to grow. And a lot of people, as they come to 10 years, might be moving off the program. So new people can join. So we felt, the council felt that that gave a lot of room for everybody to participate in the future. So that would be, I don't think we'd see that 260 for a long time if we ever saw it.
All right, very good. Just waiting to see if I've overlooked any questions.
I will just mention, since you're looking, like we used to have a limit on commercial buildings, but we don't anymore. We only have 1 commercial building participating in the program, and we have 1 applying right now. And we do have limits on the property value for Mills Act for 2.5 million for residential, 3 million for commercial, but city council can exempt those. So you have to go to city council with that. It's not as easy, but they have never denied one. Our council seems to embrace the program.
Nichole, why do you think there are so fewer commercial properties that have been designated versus residential? And is there some promotion that would be warranted to encourage more commercial properties to be designated and take advantage of the Mills Act?
You know, I do promote it to the commercial properties. I think they kind of assume they don't qualify because they're so much more valuable. Their property values are so high, but the one I'm working with right now might be like breaking that barrier. I'm hoping. So hopefully we'll get more people online with it and want to. Because I know Councilman Friedman really wanted us to prioritize the commercial buildings, to give them a boost, especially on State Street.
Yes.
Give them some of the relief they are finding barriers for, maybe from the building and safety. The historic building code could offer them some of that relief and help their projects move faster, make it easier to maintain.
I would think that you're going to receive more inquiries since the council, and really September 3rd is the date when the new zoning for the multi-unit housing ordinance amendments goes into effect in their central business district, and we'll see more adaptive reuse and redevelopment that includes combining the commercial with new residential.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to comment on that, where we're going to now be taking possibly a long-standing commercial building that has historic value and incorporating in some way residential with that.
I would hope so. I would hope they would, because I think there's a lot of things they're going to need some relief from, like even windows on a property line, things that those downtown buildings have that don't quite meet the current codes. And, to have some of these buildings as residential is would be amazing, beautiful residential units. I've been inside of some of these commercial buildings, and they have like these grand staircases that come down the center. That would be so great if that way you would walk up that to go to your apartment. I think we have such an opportunity here to make some really beautiful living spaces in these amazing buildings. I think like so many other cities have. They've revitalized whole downtowns in so many cities by bringing new use to these old buildings.
Yeah. Well, coming from New Orleans, you can speak directly to that. We have some more questions that have come in from Ed Fuller. Are people allowed to enhance the original architecture with additional period details?
So that's a tricky question. There is one of the Secretary of Interior standards is not to do something that's contrived historic. So if it's something that would have been originally on your building or fits with what would have been on your building, yes. But if you're the type of person like, oh, I like that pretty window and it's from another period and you just put it on, it starts to create this sort of contrived, not authentic piece. So I haven't seen many people want to do that, but every once in a while, somebody just wants. I had somebody who was like, I like this little craftsman, but I want to turn it into this Victorian that I saw down the street. Now that's where we're getting into something. It just wasn't that, and you can't. It's just not. That's not the way to treat that building.
Okay. And Marcella's asking, would condos and apartment buildings qualify as commercial? She's adding, what age does the building need to be considered historic?
So yes, commercial is anything anything with a rental unit. The tax assessor considers commercial. So even if you had apartments in a Victorian. And the age to be considered historic is 50 years old or older. That's the first threshold. And then we go through the other criteria. Like, do you still have a lot of the original elements? Does it still look like it did originally? We call that historic integrity. And the test is sort of if somebody lived at that time when that building was built and traveled through time to today, could they still recognize the building? And if they could, that it means it has high historic integrity. If it's been altered so much, there's like some sort of historic building in there, it probably doesn't qualify. So that's why we try and keep those elements that make it qualify, like the original windows, the original roof, like if it has the clay roof tiles, doors, porches, things like that.
Thank you, Nichole. Again, I'm just surveying the chat list here. Do we have, if our agents receive calls either from local potential clients or even out of area wanting to look at their options of perhaps purchase of beautiful historic homes or even commercial buildings, outside of or separate from those that have already been designated, do we keep a pending list that perhaps the association's members might be interested in having access to?
I don't really have a pending list, except for things that are on the inventory potentials list. We do tag them once we identify them, but it would be that's a very good idea, and I think we should start that. And I'm happy to look them up for you. You can always email me and ask me, and I can look it up for you. It is on the parcel tag if it's been identified. So you could just look up the parcel tag on the city, and it should say if it's been identified or not. Some haven't been because we kind of have a one by one process right now. But feel free to call me. And I have a lot of real estate agents call me and just get a gauge if they think a building might be historic. I'll let them know.
And just so everybody has a point of reference, where would that tagging that you're referring to be located?
So
on the property information.
Yes, on the property information report under conditions, if you're looking in the Acela program, where it'll tell you like all your zoning information. It should also have a tag historic assessment complete, and it'll tell you if it's historic, or it'll say designated resource on the site, or it'll even tell you if there's a historic building next door. And those are usually in case someone wants to build a great big apartment building. We let you know there's a historic building next door because they end up really coming. You'll have to address that in his design review anyway, and how you're being sensitive and what's around you, just so you're not looking at your property in a vacuum.
Great, thanks. And then from Pat, we have a question. There are a lot of 50 years or older buildings that have been moved to new locations or added to. How would the department qualify these buildings?
So we do take, one of the thresholds for integrity is maintaining original location, although sometimes we've had to move historic buildings just to save them. So we take it both into account. If it's the additions are so big and so much and it's been relocated, it might not qualify anymore. We even had one building where all the buildings around it were so all demolished, and it was just this last Victorian with a huge front addition on it, so it didn't qualify anymore. So it's really case by case scenario on what's left and what is it telling, what story are we still telling here. I mean, if we don't have a story to tell anymore, it's probably not going to qualify. And that's really what we're trying to give the public, is something special on our streets.
Great, thanks. I don't see any more questions, Nichole, and I want to give you an opportunity perhaps to put back up on the screen any contact information for yourself or any other references from your PowerPoint today.
Right.
Would that be helpful at this time before we start to wrap up?
Yeah, let me pull this back up, and I'll add my email to the screen so you all can have that as well. And I think I can just add it here, I think, because I did not put my email. So you can reach me there anytime, and that's probably the best during COVID because I'm working remotely, and so I'm not at my office phone anyway, and we can arrange a phone call or a meeting or whatever you need.
Great, thank you. And I believe I'll check with Casey on this. We're going to make your PowerPoint available to the membership after the forum, so everybody will have all this really valuable information that you've provided today. And I also believe we've recorded this. Is that right, Casey? Yes, thumbs up. So it's going to go out to the membership, and so whoever wasn't able to make it today or would like to refer back, we're going to have all of this handy. And let me just see if there is any closing comment or question. I think that's it. I want to again express our gratitude to Nichole Hernandez. As you can imagine, she is a highly sought after expert in our community and a resource both to our members and many other sectors as well. Nichole, thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to make an announcement to our participants. Next month, Tuesday, September 29th, is going to be the next forum brought to you by the Education Committee. Stay tuned for the details. We're still working through the program details. And Todd, on behalf of our committee as chair, would you like to make any type of a closing comment? Take a moment to see if Todd is still with us. Okay.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. I hope to hear from you. I love working with you.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone who participated today. Really appreciate your time.